Oh, the Honda CRF450RL. I have a love-hate relationship with this motorcycle, and I have ever since the first day of ownership. So today I'm going to walk you guys through why I've done this Supermoto build on our CRF. I'm the only owner of this bike. I bought it 6 months ago, brand new, and I've rocked it with a dual sport and dirt setup for the last several months. And now, just recently here, in the last week or so, I made the executive decision to go with the sumo setup. So I'm gonna walk you guys through why I did that and how it handles and feels in a sumo setup versus the dirt. And in order to tell you how we got to this point, I've kind of got to walk you through my whole ownership. So I think by the end of this video, you will have 0 questions on this bike. And I think that's enough of an intro, so let me take you on this journey now. And my name's Micah, welcome to the channel. Let's rip into it. All right, so first, we've got to start pre-ownership. So this love-hate relationship that I was talking about, it started with pure love before I had ever owned this. And I think it is for everybody. Ever since the CRF450L was released, I mean, dual sport riders around the world were kind of like, whoa. We finally got basically a street legal 450 MX bike. Fast, it's light, it's powerful, it's raw, it's brutal. I think all dual sport riders were in heaven when we first heard about the release of this machine. And once you read down the specs and features, you see what it weighs in at, how much power it has, what it has for suspension, fuel injected, aluminum frame, 6-speed transmission. There's a lot of things there that everybody really likes for these dual sports. So that was the love. That was the pure love stage. And I loved the idea of this motorcycle so much that I called my local dealership that I get all my motorcycles through, and I was like, hey, I see you have a CRF450RL. Does anybody have a deposit on it? They said no. I said, perfect. I'm coming with cash. What do you want for it? They said the amount. I said, okay. I went there. I picked it up. No test drive, no nothing. Just bought on site, never having ridden it. And I didn't have a worry at all. I thought, yep, that's what I've been looking for. That's what I've been dreaming about. Look at it on paper. It's the best. And right on the first day of ownership, after my first ride, the pure love turned to pure hate. Like, honestly, there was no love. It was just like, what is this thing? Like, I've always been drawn to Hondas because they're so smooth, they're so reliable. The thing functions like a Swiss watch, or at least all my other Hondas had. So let me just walk you through what a CRF450RL feels like right out of the box. It has the most aggressive, abrupt throttle response you can possibly imagine. Wear a neck brace for your first ride because it is just gonna be a herky-jerky experience. On top of that, the clutch. The clutch engagement or friction zone seems to be about 1 millimeter. You have nothing, then you have everything. So the combination of this herky-jerky throttle with this ultra-sensitive clutch that has a very strong hard pull, might I add, right out of the box. Mine softened up a little bit, but still, this is a harder clutch pull than some 1000cc Supersport leader bikes. And I don't understand the reason for that. The grip strength on my left hand is very good now. Then we get to the engine. So this is basically just a CRF450R motor that has some emissions things on it so that they can street legalize it. It's just as raw, brutal, and abrupt and powerful, seemingly, as just the CRF450R MX bike. So if you've ever ridden one of those, a CRF450R is a lot to handle. This is not a motorcycle to smell the roses on. This is like ripping across the sand dunes at 80, taking 120-foot jumps, full throttle everywhere type of bike. And the CRF450RL feels exactly like that. It just has a headlight, turn signals, and a tail light. Now, 450 MX bikes are perfect in in the right environment. When you get to those big jumps, those wide open spaces, those monster sand dunes, a 450 MX bike is the perfect tool for the job. It is not the perfect tool for putting around in the city, for going on trails, for doing casual adventure riding and just dual sporting. 450 is just a very aggressive bike to ride when you're not in the right environment for it, that you can really let its abilities shine. So now is where we get specific to my situation. So I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I've had plenty of dual sport cycles before, ridden plenty, all different sizes. I enjoy it very much. It's actually my favorite style of motorcycle to ride. And all my other dual sports I enjoyed thoroughly. Riding all the places that I do, all the places that I find around here. Once I got the CRF here, suddenly all the places that all these dual sports that I've had, you know, places that they were so fun to ride and so fun to putt through and rip through, well, they became very not fun just because this was so much. It was so much more power than I needed. That abrupt throttle, that touchy clutch, that engine that just wants to be wound up. Suddenly all the dual sport riding that I had around here was not fun. And I think that's just because I was on a bike that was just so far beyond the terrain, the trails, the environment that I was putting it through. And I'm coming off of a DRZ 400S. So understand that. I'm coming off of a 39 horsepower 400cc dual sport. So I thought the CRF450RL was just gonna be the same thing, but better in every way. Well, for the riding that I was doing, this was literally worse in every possible way. It was not good for the slow, scenic trails that I have around here. On the streets, it's just so abrupt. You have no cush hubs. You have a very abrupt on-off throttle response. That engine just wants to be gassed. It is hard to maintain one set speed on this bike. You feel it just lurching forward and back when you try and hold one set speed. And you know, you can't take a passenger on it. There's limited cargo options. It's not going to be practical in that sense. Oil changes are every 600 miles. Valve checks are every 1,800 miles. My DRZ had oil changes every 3,500 miles. Valve checks at 16,000. So once I really got down to it, this bike, even though it looked perfect for me, it looked better than what I was riding in every single way on paper. And once my butt was on that seat, I found out that this was worse in every way. What this is, right out of the box, is a fantastic dirt bike that the cops will not pull you over for being on because it's street legal. But you get all of the qualities of a full-fledged MX bike. So while that is very good for extreme terrain off-road, none of those qualities you really want for on-road. You can say you want lightweight, but you do want some weight. You can say you want power, but you do need that to be delivered smoothly in a linear manner. You might think a Honda is a maintenance-free cycle. This one is not. So after I really got to know this motorcycle, I started to hate it a little bit less. Not that it became any better for the riding that I do or that I have available to me, but just my understanding of it made me hate it a little bit less. Because then I kind of started to understand exactly what it is, and it is purpose-built. This is a street legal MX bike. I thought I was getting a dual sport. It's not a dual sport. It's a street legal dirt bike. Now, while I do tend to clock plenty of miles in the dirt, I would still say that over 50% of the miles on my dual sports have been on the road, because I've always got to ride to the place that I'm gonna off-road. You know, I've got to ride to the place, to the trails. You know, some of them will be half an hour away. So I just needed a dual sport with better road manners than this had. And I just don't have the terrain around me. I do not have those sand dunes to rip. I do not have steep mountains that I can rip up the side. I don't have the buttes. I don't have the forests and public lands. Nebraska just sucks if you're an off-road or dual sport rider, and I am, but I didn't realize how bad it sucks until I got this bike. Yeah, we have nothing here. Do not move here if you're a dual sport rider. Or it's bad if you have a bike this capable, is what I'll say, because I never seem to mind too much on a DRZ 400, but yeah, the CRF450RL made me hate Nebraska. So now we get to the sumo portion of the story. So me realizing that I just don't have access and availability to the off-road environments that this bike would really shine in, I started thinking, what would it be like if I just purpose-built it to be a sumo? To be my hooligan stunt bike goon machine, and I'll just treat it as if it were a stunted out ZX6R, but I can take jumps. So I really stewed on that a few days and started reading some different forums, you know, watch some videos of other people supermotoing the CRF, or just supermoto videos in general. And that's when I really started to realize I have more of an urban playground accessible to me versus the off-road where I'm at. So let me mention, at this point in time, you know, I've owned the bike not even 6 months, and I have 680 miles on it. Like nothing. I just wasn't putting miles on this bike because I didn't have an area that this was fun to ride in. So I started doing all the research of what I would need, what I'd want for rims, how I want to gear it, what I want to do for a rear sprocket. If I purpose build this to be a supermoto and just plan to goon around on the streets, and I'll get something else for off-road. Or I mean, I still have my Enduro tires and wheels. I have the factory dual sports. I have full-fledged knobbies. In an hour, I can convert this thing back to be the best Enduro-focused dual sport of all time. So you're not completely losing your dirt dual sport capabilities to go sumo. You basically just gotta drop $1,100. But I became convinced that I would enjoy that and I would like this bike more if I converted it, if I geared it, if I did everything right to make this a really practical, fun sumo to ride. And so the research began, and the way I built this supermoto, I just sourced out all the individual kind of parts that I want. You know, you can go on Warp 9 or Solo Racer and get just kind of kits, or you can build your own kit. You know, you select your motorcycle, choose the exact wheel, the exact spokes, the exact anchors, the exact hubs, you know, colors, styles. It seems like some of those get a little bit pricey if you start to get things that aren't just the bare bones minimum option. So I just built the setup that you see here on Amazon and eBay. I just kind of went on there, was shopping around like, okay, that's the exact sprocket I want, I'll get that. Okay, that's the exact hub and wheel I want, I'll get that. Ooh, those are the tires I want for mine. So it let me personalize it and really build a sumo, the exact sumo that I wanted. You know, I wasn't just sifting through the few options that some site had for me in their build platform. So I ordered all the parts, they got here, and I built this thing in a day. Well, actually 2 days, because I pinched the tube as I was mounting my tire and tube. I haven't done that in years. That was embarrassing. That was a shameful moment. So I got a new tube, finished it the next morning. So I went with a very traditional sumo setup, right? So, of course, the 17-inch rims, front and rear. The front, I did the 3-inch. The rear, I did the 4 1/4, because I knew for tires, I wanted a 120/70/17. On the rear, I wanted a 150/60/17. Now, some people on their supermoto builds, you'll see the 140 rear tires, the 150s, the 160s sometimes. But for spacing, I never wanted to be worried about spacing, clearance, premature wear on tires, or anything from chains or stuff touching. So I went with the 4 1/4 rear. The 150/60/17 tire on that size rim is just perfect. Perfect shape, this bike just dances everywhere. Just perfect traction as you're sitting straight up. And when you are in the corners, I have dove this thing into corners, and I have inch-wide chicken strips on either side of the rear tire. Well, even the front, obviously. You can see that right there. So I haven't even begun to explore the limits of what a Supermoto setup can really do. And it's because it's so foreign to me. This is the first Supermoto that I've owned. I've certainly ridden a bunch, but I'm not diving somebody else's bike into a corner or drifting it or anything like that. So this is the first Supermoto that I've really got to be a hooligan on. And what you notice right off the bat when you really get to rip on a Supermoto is that it is so much more capable, agile, flickable, fun to ride for me than any 600cc Supersport, any 1000cc Supersport. I mean, it's not even comparable. These wheelie easier, these stoppy easier, they just steer. You can throw them around effortlessly. This is 280 pounds. Gassed up, ready to rock. So you have a stunting street demon that is 280 pounds. Yes, you can do whatever you want with it. It is the craziest experience you'll ever have on two wheels. I mean, leader bikes are awesome, right? They're so fast, but this is just totally different, and like you think it does it. Now, the gearing I went with on our Supermoto setup, I kept the stock 13-tooth sprocket up front. Now, for the rear, you need to go down in sprocket size. The stock size is going to be a 51, but you need to go down in size in order just to maintain your current gearing, because you're going from that 18-inch wheel down to the 17. So I went with a 44-tooth rear sprocket. So relative to the factory gearing on Enduro tires, the 44-tooth on the rear is just a smidge taller, which I think that's what you want. When you Supermoto this setup, I think you want slightly taller gearing than factory, because you're not going to be off-road. You don't need that super short first gear. And if you've got super sport tires, you know, you may run down the interstate at 75 miles per hour. So you want to make that a little bit more comfortable than it would have been on the stock Enduro setup. So I would say that going with the 44 tooth, it's just barely taller. Just barely. I mean, 5% maybe, 5 to 10% I'll say, is how much taller that 44 tooth with a 17 that has a 150/60/17 tire on it. And that has been perfect. I can cruise at 70 miles per hour down the highway effortlessly. The bike isn't screaming, everything is smooth, everything is stable, everything is barely planted for riding a 280-pound motorcycle at those speeds. You know, definitely still hang on to the handlebars when that semi comes past you, but otherwise you do feel very planted. So now, what are my emotions after the Supermoto build? After I've probably put 200 miles on it now since it's been a Sumo, and it's very good. I'm back to the loving this bike. I haven't experienced those feelings since, well, before I bought it. But yeah, the 450RL, just the craziest swing of emotions for me. Loved it before I ever saw one in person, hated it right after the first day of ownership. Was in a love-hate relationship with it at the 600-700 mile mark. Now that we're fully sumoed on it and factoring in where I live and what I have available to me for off-road things, now I'm back to loving it. So the CRF450RL as a sumo is just crazy. It's everything you want it to be when you're building that stunt hooligan machine, something that you just want to be rowdy as hell. This is the platform that you want to start from. That aggressive throttle, that racing motor, that spunky clutch, the good ground clearance, the lightweight, the world-class suspension. Golly, this has to be one of the best possible bikes you could Supermoto. I mean, I honestly do think that. And obviously, this was my first build, my first Supermoto build on a 450RL. And after a couple 100 miles, boy, there isn't anything that I can even possibly think of changing. Tires, the gearing, the feel, the aesthetic of it. So that's been my journey with this bike so far. I'm really glad where I'm at. It's been the craziest journey. You know, at the end of the day, I'm very happy that I bought this bike, even though that now I'm using it for something that I totally didn't initially plan on when I got it. But I just needed to know that curiosity was killing me. You know, I've been stewing on these bikes for 5 years. Well, more than that. You know, just thinking that, that is the dual sport I need. That's my finisher bike. That's what I want. And like I said, it's understandable to think that once you see it on paper, you read through the specs and features, you see people riding it, you see what it can do, you see what it's capable of. And yeah, the capabilities, the bike was just built for so much more than I can offer it in an off-road adventure setting where I'm at. So instead of going to an off-road park, now I'll just go to the industrial district in my city. We'll find some closed businesses and those loading ramps, those parking bays. That is going to be our MX park. So hopefully this was all kind of insightful to you guys and kind of just gave you a glimpse into the beast that the CRF450RL actually is. And you might hear it, you might read it, you'll never quite understand until you finally get your butt on one of these things. So that about sums it up. That's why we did what we did. I just wanted to give you all the details on that. So comment if you guys have any questions at all. Otherwise, like the video if this helped you out. Subscribe if you want to see more. And until next time.